so exciting, and thank you for being here to support Rotary, and then to support Kathy in her talk. Dr. Kathleen Yoder was appointed as McLean County Coroner in 2014, and then re-elected in 2016, and she just announced she's running again, thank goodness. Prior to her appointment, Kathleen was a nurse practitioner in emergency medicine at Advocate Roman Regional Medical Center. Kathleen has both a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Science in Nursing from Mennonite College of Nursing, and became a board-certified family nurse practitioner, which means she can prescribe drugs. So she knows what she's talking about. She spent time with the neurosurgery team at OSF St. Francis Medical Center in Peoria, Illinois, and has taught undergraduate and graduate courses at both Illinois Wesleyan and Illinois State University. While working on her Doctor of Nursing practice from Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee, Kathleen continued to provide care to neurosurgical patients at Carl Foundation Hospital and worked on research for a cooling brain helmet, a NASA-inspired Department of Defense contract-funded award, which was presented at the International Stroke Conference. This girl has some major jobs. She is a member of Sigma Theta Tau International Nursing Honor Society and was on the board of directors for the Illinois Society of Advanced Practice Nurses in 2008. Currently a member of Advocate Roman Eureka Governing Council, Mennonite College of Nursing Strategy and Planning Council. She's here today to talk to us about opioids. And just a real short personal story. My younger sister had extensive back surgery several years ago. And to reduce the pain, the doctors used OxyContin and several other pain meds, and today she's addicted. She comes from a good family, and through no fault of her own, only through seeking health care, she now has to deal with her addiction to opioids. So Kathy has a great story to tell you, and will help you learn if you have a family member who's suffering or friends who are suffering. She'll help you understand what's going on in their life, and you can be a great help. Enjoy.
So thanks for having me here. I'm like, yay, punk crowd. So I hope you learned from it. Some people say that they've heard this speech and they kind of go home and they're like, oh, yeah. Well, remember in the end, I'm a really warm, fuzzy person. Okay. So, next slide. So as Kat said, I do have my doctorate from Vanderbilt University. A lot of my research was on like this cooling brain helmet. The war ended, funding ended, so that's what happens. But the interesting thing, I was talking to a gentleman from Rotary yesterday that was talking about massage therapy for pain for veterans, right? And so it was very fascinating. The interesting thing with the cooling brain helmet with migraines, when we talk about pain addiction, with migraines, pain medications aren't given anymore because it's really more of an inflammatory process, and so it's steroids. And so the cooling brain helmet was also something that they were talking about to help with chronic migraine sufferers, PTSD, because all of your thought processes are on the outside of your brain, and if that makes sense, right? If anybody knows about the brain is like this, and all the outside of the brain, if you cool it, will decrease the inflammatory process, the stress, PTSD, and inflammatory process of migraine. So it's fascinating research. Okay, so next slide. So with every presentation, what I'm going to do is define what an opioid is, the history of prescription, where did we come, how are we here, and then illustrate the scope nationally and locally of what's going on in the opioid epidemic and what law enforcement started to do, and then what we're doing as a county. So hopefully your counties where you're from will do that as well. So next slide. So overview. Can everybody see this? Okay. So I know because it's kind of bright in here. There we go. Is that better? So in 1999 to 2014, 165,000 people were addicted to opioids. And then we account for 5% of the world's population, but 80% of the opioid prescriptions and users. Isn't that amazing? What do foreign countries do? Increased mobility and morbidity and mortality in HIV and Hep C. And then $72 billion in healthcare costs. I was just talking to someone yesterday, again, the other gentleman from Rotary, and said that the healthcare costs are actually way high, over $100 billion in healthcare costs of the opioid epidemic. So it's really, we're struggling as a nation to overcome this addiction. And then one child is born every hour that's addicted to opioids. Next slide. So when I first did this speech, I was asked to speak to the Regional Nursing Conference over in Peoria in October of 2016. And I said, I think healthcare providers didn't purposely start it, but prescription practices did. And it was a new thing, and I presented it in October. When I was starting to extrapolate my data and research, this is when this letter came out from the U.S. Surgeon General. The U.S. Surgeon General had never really written American physicians and said, we have to change our practices. And this was the first time that they actually said, we're going to change our practices with the opioid epidemic and prescription practices. So, next slide. So, what is an opioid? Well, the interesting thing, I've taught nursing for over 12 years, and I was with faculty, and I said, Kathy, is meth the same as an opioid? And I'm like, you are, nursing faculty. And so a lot of people don't understand the difference between opioids and methamphetamines. Well, opioids are actually made from poppy plants. And the interesting part is poppies are grown in Afghanistan. That's dry desert. And so when we're talking about how to get rid of opioids, when we don't really want to get rid of them, and I'll tell you why. But if you tell the McLean County farmer not to grow corn and soybeans, what would they do? They would be devastated. So when you're thinking of a third world country such as Afghanistan and tell them that they can't grow poppies anymore for the opium, right? They would be financially devastated because it's a third world country and their government really doesn't help them, right? So they have to make money. But opioids are used for pain relief. It's low doses, it can help with pain, but it causes euphoria. What it does is it binds to the breathing receptors of the brain, but it slows the CNS, which is the central nervous system. That is what helps the body to, or tells our body to breathe and for our heart to beat, right? And so it binds in the central nervous system to the breathing receptors, and what it does is it slows the respirations, it slows the heart rate, and lowers your blood pressure. So if you ever have an elderly person take an opioid, they can go down. As we know today, Bill's mom, my husband, who's doing the thing, his mom has a fractured shoulder from last evening, and they gave her Norco, and she went unresponsive because she's elderly. Okay, next slide. So how do opioids work on the human body? Well, they work on the mu receptors, which is mu receptors, the opioid receptors in our body. What does that mean? Well, when we're sitting here like this, right, just sitting here like this, none of us are truly in pain. But when they're addicted to opioids and they've taken opioids for so long, these mu receptors are hypersensitive to anything. So the addict, after 2 months or months of doing opioids, actually will never feel comfortable sitting here again. There's always a source of pain. Does that make sense? They always feel pain. And someone said, well, won't they ever feel good again? And I said, no, they'll never feel good again. Because the first time someone does heroin, first time, is like the holding the hand of God. If you can think about that concept, and not to bring Christianity into it, but it's the concept of how do you feel, right? They feel that euphoric. You have never felt that euphoric because you've never been addicted to heroin or to an opioid. But they have. They know what true euphoria feels like. They will never feel that good again. So they chase that demon the rest of their life. Even if they're off the drug, they'll still think about it, dream about it, want that joy in their life again, that euphoria. So we're fighting chronic depression because of those mu receptors. But the mu receptors work for respiratory depression, analgesia, which is the numbing part of it, remember, because it works on the mu receptors, and then euphoria. Next slide. So how are they ingested? Well, Vicodin, Norco, Percocet, OxyContin. Like let's say Norco is prescribed 1 to 2 tablets every 4 to 6 hours as needed for pain. But sometimes people will take those, like I'm having a little bit more pain, I'll take an extra one. And sometimes they're prescribed, like the Norco is prescribed 5 milligrams of hydrocodone with 325 milligrams of Tylenol. Sometimes they prescribe 1 tablet of 10 milligrams of 325. Well, if someone thinks, well, I can take 2 tablets, they take 20 of that, right? And then it's 20, and then they overdose. Do you see? So they don't know because they're used to 1 to 2 tablets. But if you take 1 to 2 tablets, you get the prescripted. You kind of know what you're going to get. The interesting part is with heroin, a lot of people think, well, I don't think they do heroin. They don't have track marks. Well, I'm here to tell you, track marks aren't usually seen. They're only usually seen in the late stages of heroin abuse, right? They usually snort it. So you don't see the meth addict. Like the meth addict looks like someone that's on drugs because of the way that drug is. So they may have dental decay. And they have dental decay because it actually dries the pulp in their teeth. And so by the time that they have the rotten teeth, the damage to the bones and everything are done. The reason they have issues with their skin, you can look at a meth addict and their back is okay because they can't really reach there, but a meth addict has the facial issues and the skin issues because they feel like bugs are crawling on their skin all the time, so they're picking them. Heroin addicts don't have that. They look like you and me, or opioid addicts look like you and me. They may not be slender, you know, like you think a meth person would, so they look like you and me. There's a lot of people that are addicted to opioids. So, and then the first time, these drugs are so powerful, the way the cartels are making them, is the first time that you do an heroin, you could die with the needle still in your arm. Next slide. So, opioid side effects, you can get tolerance, you can get constipation is a big one. You can get the itching and the sweating. Has anybody had an epidural? Like a C-section? Did you have the itching? That's because, you know why? Because they didn't do the mu receptors correctly. That's why you had the itching. Guys didn't have that. C-sections, you don't know. But if you have an epidural having a baby, you'll know that itching. You're like, oh my God. But that's because the anesthesiologist didn't do the mu receptors correctly. Okay, next slide. So, and you can kind of bump through these. So what it does, what opioids do is bind to the breathing receptors of your brain. Once you take too much, it bumps it off, and then your brain forgets to breathe. Okay? And then you have an overdose. So, kind of bump it through. Click. The likes all the little.
Sorry. I told you this is a lot of pressure.
So, for opioids, people didn't realize tramadol is an opioid. That's prescribed a lot. Darvocet. Does everybody remember using Darvocet? If you're old enough, back in the day, that was a great drug, right? That helped so good. The issue is Darvocet, the pharmacokinetics, or the way that the drug has a half-life and goes through your body, it was longer than Vicodin or something like that. And so it would hurt the kidneys and hurt the liver, and it only took 8 pills to overdose on, and so a lot of people were overdosing and dying on Darvocet because of what it was doing to your body. So they took Darvocet off the market. It was a great drug though 20 years ago, but there's so many, you know, every great drug there's a bad thing. So then fentanyl. Fentanyl's a great drug. If you go in and you have an open book fracture of your pelvis, you're in shock from a car wreck, right? You need pain medications. You can't take this off. If you're dying of cancer and you need fentanyl for pain, then give fentanyl for pain. The problem is the fentanyl that we hear about is synthetic fentanyl made in clandestine labs by the drug cartels. And then we have loperamide. Anybody know what loperamide is? Loperamide is Imodium. Imodium is an opiate, you know, it's for antidiarrheal. Antidiarrheal, it's on the market. You can buy it. Imodium it's an opioid antagonist or agonist, in your abdomen, in your gut. But high doses of that works like an opioid and will kill you. And they sell it on the street. I mean, you can buy it anywhere. I first learned about loperamide, I've heard about it in Chicago, that the drug addicts were trying to beat the drug test, you know, in court and things like that, in probation. They were learning how to use Imodium. And they were learning it kind of in the prison system. And so they taught drug addicts how to do it. Anyway, when they go to drug court here, like in McLean County, to beat the drug court system, because the toxicology for drug court does not test for Imodium. Now, what Imodium also does is prolongs the QT interval of your heart. So what that does is, you know, anybody watch the EKG and it's like lub-dub, right? Boom, boom. Well, the boom, boom, it prolongs. And when you prolong the QT elevation, that's when you get the fireman's hat and you get a myocardial infarction or a heart attack, right? So it prolongs the QT interval. So it's also blocking off your respiratory, Imodium is. but it's also causing fatal heart arrhythmias. Are they constipated? You betcha. When you look at their bowels, it looks like an anaconda swallowed eggs. It is stool, stool, stool. They're in pain, but they will take these drugs to beat it. When I first had Imodium death, it was an elderly person. And we subpoenaed the medical records, and it said 70 underlined Imodium. I called the doctor, and I said, what did that mean? And they're like, Kathy, they were taking 70 Imodium a day. I said, did you know Imodium will kill you? They said, no, that's not true. And I said, no, that's what they died of, is a loperamide overdose. This elderly gentleman didn't even realize he was addicted to Imodium.
Wow.
Right? Didn't even realize. When I went in for a colonoscopy, I was talking to my gastroenterologist, and I said, hey, you know Imodium will kill you. And he goes, oh, that's BS, Kathy. And I said, do you want to see the data? And so now it's coming out that it is. But remember, we didn't know about Sudafed making methamphetamines until years later, right? So hopefully people are learning about Imodium today. Next slide.
Kathy, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
It hops back a little bit, but I was curious, with the poppies being grown and manufactured in Afghanistan, do they have an opiate crisis like we do here? Or do
No, they
ship it
don't.
off?
They ship it off to the United States.
Excellent.
The
Okay.
interesting thing is, one of my best friends, and the reason I know this about the over there, is one of my best friends was the head of our FBI in Afghanistan during the Bush administration. So he would go over there and meet Antonio Gonzalez and Condoleezza Rice, right? Those were his people over there. And Hamid Karzai, remember Hamid Karzai? His brother was the biggest opium dealer. So they were making money off of their poor farmers. Isn't that sad? It's how governments sometimes don't care about their people.
Right.
Right. So they were working in the fields not knowing what they were growing.
Producing. Sure.
Right, producing. So the history of prescribing. So in 1991, 76 million prescriptions for opioids were made. And then they came out with pain as the fifth vital sign. Do you ever go to your doctor and they take your blood pressure, your pulse, your temperature, your respirations? They're like, how do you rate your pain? How's your pain? You okay? So, and then American Pain Society came out with like tolerance. Can't have a tolerance, American Pain Society, right? They're making money. Can't have a tolerance, you can't overdose, not gonna happen. So they bonded with Purdue Pharma. We've all heard about Purdue Pharma. Well, Purdue Pharma, if you've ever done research, what you know about research is research can be skewed. So Purdue Pharma came out with OxyContin. When they came out with OxyContin, they gave it to people on one surgical unit in a hospital and prescribed everybody OxyContin after like a knee surgery or something like that. And they went around for 3 days and said, how do you feel? And they're like, feel great. Feel like you need it more? No, I feel great. And they took 3 days of documentation and wrote great research on it. And then they marketed that you can't get a tolerance, you're not addicted to it, not gonna hurt you. And that's how research can skew everything, okay? So, and within 4 years, it's a $1 billion industry. Amazing, isn't it? They were over just prescribing OxyContin. Next slide. So, Joint Commission for Accreditation of Hospitals is an interesting beast. Every hospital gets accredited. And so when I was a nurse and working under JACO, you had to document what someone's pain is. Remember, pain is the fifth vital sign. And then you have to document, what's your pain? 0 to 1 to 10, what's your pain? What are you okay with your pain? Well, if you get a paper cut, anybody get a paper cut and you're like, oh my God, that's like a 10. Just thinking about a paper cut, right? Well, when someone goes in for a knee replacement, they already have pain. You go in, have you ever seen an orthopedic surgeon? They wear schmediums because their muscles are huge, right? Well, they have to crack those bones. You're going through trauma to get a knee replacement. Are you going to come out and feel like 0 on a scale of 1 to 10? No, they cut through all your muscles. So what is the expectation of pain? If their expectation of a pain is 0, then we're not teaching patients correctly that you're going to come out sore and have inflammation. If you go in for a C-section, they don't, and you get a new baby, they don't prescribe you OxyContin. They don't, right? You get a new prize, you get a baby, and life is great. But if you go in for a hysterectomy, they prescribe you OxyContin, which is like having a C-section, which they wouldn't give to a new mom, right? So why would we do that? So then hospital consumers, which is HCAHPS, that's the Yelp for hospitals. So how are hospitals rated? That was formed in 2005. And that means something on where we are today. So in 2007, a patient was overdosing every 19 minutes. Purdue Pharma said, you know what, you were right. We made a mistake. It was supposed to be a 12-hour acting medication. It's only 8, maybe 10. And so patients were needing the drug because they were addicted, so they needed more and were taking more, and people were overdosing. And it was a pill form medication. So what people were doing was crushing it and snorting it, or melting it and injecting it because they needed the drug, and they needed it quickly because they were withdrawing within those 4 hours, right? Because the medication didn't last long enough. So Purdue Pharma, people now are addicted to OxyContin. They've prescribed it to everyone. They said, you know what, we cannot not sell it anymore and take it completely off the market. So they made a pact with the federal government and said, we'll just make it into a plastic matrix. So if someone tries to snort it, it foams in their nose. Or if they try to melt it, it'll turn into tar. Well, they didn't take OxyContin off the market, right? They didn't tell people that this drug is not working for you like it should. You will get addicted. So in 2013, American physicians and nurse practitioners were writing a prescription of opioids for every adult American. That's profound. They were giving opioids for dental. You don't get an opioid for a dental. Because how long does your nerve over your tooth last? 24 hours. Dental pain, you can live through the 24 hours of that nerve pain from your tooth because the nerve's dead after 24 hours. The dental pain is usually an infection and an inflammatory response. So anybody that says that they take Norco for dental really didn't need it. Does that kind of make sense? Because the nerves are dead. Okay. So in 2014, synthetic fentanyl came out. The drug cartels made synthetic fentanyl. Next slide. So in 2014, when I was a nurse practitioner in the emergency room at Broman, the interesting part, when I started in 2005 as a nurse practitioner for the neurosurgery team, so 2005 to 2014, okay? So all those years I've been a nurse practitioner. So in 2005, over in the neurosurgery team, when someone had back surgery, we prescribed 60 of Vicodin, 60 of Valium with 3 refills. We were the candy men. That was standard of care. That was standard of protocol for the neurosurgery team. And I worked with some great doctors. One doctor was going to take care of JFK. I worked with some brilliant doctors over at St. Francis. Then in 2014, the Controlled Substance Act came out. What does that mean? Well, that means that Norco and all those medications didn't turn into a Schedule II narcotic. That meant that as a nurse practitioner, you couldn't write for it. You had to get an agreement by your physician. And then also, when you went to your doctor, you had to go to the doctor to get the prescription. The doctor couldn't call it in anymore. They had to go to the doctor. So let's say you didn't have health insurance. So you have to go to the doctor. Remember, health insurance, there's this big debate. Well, if you go to your doctor, you have to pay a facilities fee too. They added that on. So if you don't have health insurance and you're an addict and you need your drugs and you want your drugs, it's a minimum of $300 to walk into a doctor to get that paper prescription. On top of that, Norco may cost you $60. Heroin's $5 on the street. So what they did was they tried to stop and tell people you need to come in and get reevaluated. But then they're addicted, and it's $5 on the street. An addict thinks different. Because what happens with the addict's mind or someone who's... So remember Maslow's hierarchy of need of food, water, shelter, right? We all learned that in 7th and 8th grade. The problem is when the dopamine, right? We learned that in 7th grade, right? We should have. But I did. But anyway, the dopamine receptors in the brain change, which is your euphoria, right? So the dopamine receptors in your brain change. The addict wants food, water, shelter. They do. But the human brain, the addict's brain, wants the drug more because the receptors have changed. So even though they love their family, even though they want a job, they want the drug more. Does that make sense? They'll do anything to get that drug because their mind has changed and will change forever. So it sounded good with the Controlled Substance Act. And then CMS and HCAPS bonded. CMS is the Center for Medicare and Medicaid. They run our health insurance. Everything's based on CMS. Aetna is, Blue Cross Blue Shield, they're kind of the gold standard. Well, they bonded with HCAPS, which is your Yelp for hospitals. So when the healthcare reform came out, it sounded great, right? We get health insurance for all, but we're going to do PRESCRIBING scores. Pain management was a part of the PRESCRIBING score. How did your doctor handle your pain? Did your doctor ask you what your pain was? Is your pain better? Well, Duke University did a research study and found out that's when the opioid epidemic really went up. And what do the PRESCRIBING scores mean? Well, you guys are business managers. Is every employee at 5 out of 5 on their employee evaluations? No, because what have we done as employers? We're not perfect. We could always learn more. There's an extra class you could have gone to. You know you were 5 minutes late to work, right? That's kind of the mentality. So you don't always give your employee a 5 out of 5 on their on their evaluation. But CMS and HCAPS on the PRESCRIBING scores expects physicians to get 5 out of 5 on their patient satisfaction. So doctors are like, how are you pain? On pain med, because if they don't get a 5 out of 5 on their PRESCRIBING scores, they won't get federally funded, they're going to be coached and counseled, and they may lose their job. Crazy, isn't it? So, next slide. Duke University also did a research study. The PRESCRIBING scores also made infections go up higher too, like the super infections. Because when you go to your doctor's office and you're paying all this money and you've had 2 days of sinus drainage, and you want an antibiotic because you get this every year. The problem is the CDC does not recommend antibiotics until you have pudding coming out your nose. Maxillary sinus pressure, green put, you know what I mean? Everything else is a virus. But if you go to your doctor, you've just paid over $300. You want that antibiotic, don't you? And how do you argue that? That's why we get super infections. So Narcan came out in 2016. In 2016, that's when the synthetic fentanyl was really hitting its high. And the East Coast and the West Coast of your police were noticing these overdoses. And they were running with 2-man teams of paramedics because these drugs were so powerful. So here in McLean County, they're like, we've got to have Narcan. It was part of the state act. And so I trained the sheriff's department and normal police department and all the surrounding communities how to use the nasal injected Narcan. Well, those drugs are 4 milligrams of 2 doses that each police officer carries. It has to be in a controlled temperature in the car, so the cars have to be on. The drug has to only a shelf life for so long. You have to get grants to write those, you know, for the Narcan. But 2 doses, we thought, well, that's usually what works is 2 doses. The problem is these drugs are so strong on the street that it takes 9 to 13 rounds of Narcan to save your life. Firemen don't have that, or police officers don't have that. And then they wanted to sell Narcan on the shelf. The problem is these drugs are so strong that you need 9 to 13 doses. And you need to get to the emergency room right away because Narcan only has a half-life of 30 minutes. The opioid has a life of 4 to 6 hours. So they shoot the Narcan up their nose when they're doing drugs, and then they come awake. They better go to the emergency room right away because they're going to go die again. Does that make sense? But they haven't. How do you get that to an addict? Like, this Narcan's not going to work for you. You need to go to the emergency room. So that became a problem. Anyway, in 2016, the American Family Physicians, yay, voted to get pain off of there as one of the 5th vital signs, and then also tried to get the pain on the PRESCRIBING score off. Hasn't worked yet. They were supposed to do it in 2018 and hadn't worked. Next slide. So now we're in the overdoses, and this is what's happened. Isn't it sad? Next slide. So this is not the first time, though, that we've had opioids or heroin in the United States. Remember, cocaine was in Coca-Cola, right? Well, heroin was used in cough syrup for little kids. Not as bad for you, put them to sleep. You know, and did kids really die of influenza, or were they dying of the drugs that we were giving them? Right? Who knows? Right? We don't know. So they came out, the morphine was made, and then the production of heroin was given to children. Next slide. 1920s, Congress said we have the Dangerous Drug Act. We can't have that. 2,000 people were addicted to heroin. And then they came out with the Vicodin, 1984. And then they had the drug trade from Southeast Asia. And now we have the synthetic fentanyls. Next slide. So this is the drug trade out of Afghanistan. You have China with China white. They don't care if we're dying. Drug traffickers do not care if you're dying. The Mexicans bonded with the Colombians. The Colombians were the first ones to put the fentanyl into heroin. The interesting thing about build a wall or have it, stop this, the problem is El Chapo, you know who El Chapo is? Those tunnels are $1 million to make. Each pass-through of drugs is a $66 million profit. They're not going to lose their money. They're not. Remember, and the Colombians are like, oh, we're going to get them more addicted. Let's put synthetic fentanyl in there. This fentanyl that they make is clandestine labs, right? The thing is, remember the dopamine in your brain and Maslow's hierarchy of need, which with each overdose death, you get 100 more buyers. Why do you get 100 more buyers? They want the drug. That's the good stuff. If I cut it in half, I'll know how to use it. I'm not going to overdose it. They didn't know what they were doing. They must have some really good euphoric stuff. Remember, they're chasing that demon to sit with the hand of God, right? They're not thinking correctly because their brain has changed. Next slide. Fact, 4 out of 5 new heroin users previously used opioids non-medically. Next slide. 500,000 Americans are addicted to heroin. They look like you and me. Next slide. Twice as many prescription pills to overdose compared to heroin. That was true, but now it's changing. Next slide. This is what heroin looks like. See how it's white? The Colombians kind of have a dirty little brand. But, you mix it together, you don't know. When we do have youth drug come and do things at the coroner's office, one of my deputies would ask, who trusts their drug dealer? And they're like, I do. Really? That's how their minds are. They don't understand this. Who trusts your drug dealer?
Who are you talking to? Who are you asking? Who is that question being
Youthful
asked?
DUIs, people, little kids, teenagers that come in with DUIs, they trust their drug dealer. It's my friend. He's not your friend. They're selling you drugs. Interesting. But that's, remember when young people are in Erickson's stage of identity versus isolation? Right, where I'm in Erickson's stage of generativity versus stagnation. Am I doing well? I'm still going out there and educating everyone. Well, children are identity versus isolation, teenagers are, and that's why they want to use the drugs. They have drug parties, throw the drugs in. Everybody's doing it, I'll do it.
And that's local? You're seeing that?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it happens.
Yeah. It's kind of like, why do 18-year-olds make the best soldiers? Right? Take that hill. Sure, we'll take that hill, right? They're indefensible. Right? Nothing's ever going to happen to them. An older person going into war, they'll be like, I got kids at home. Bad things can happen. But little kids, remember, it's not going to happen to them. Young people, identity versus isolation. We're all doing it. Let's do it together. Next slide. So that's black tar heroin. Don't see that a lot. Next slide. So the foils, the glitter. When I first went on crime scenes, as a nurse practitioner in the ER, you see the effects of opioids. The issue is when you go in a crime scene, you see all these little glittery stuff on the floor. Well, when we prescribe medication that's in a powder in the hospital, we mix it with normal saline. We kind of rub the glass jar with our hands. We put in a filter needle, filter out all the bad stuff before we put it in the IV or in the arm, right? The issue is they don't have filter needles on the street when they're crushing up these medications. So they have to use mesh or something like that. Well, those little mesh filaments break off, and that's why you have the track marks. Okay, so next slide.
How big are those? Like, what's the sense of scale on those?
Those are really tiny, little glittery things all over the ground, little foils and stuff. Okay, next slide. So synthetic fentanyl came out in 2016. It was called Drop Dead, Risk to First Responders. Remember, we used to have drug dogs would go in and sniff. They can't do that anymore because the size of a grain of salt will kill a 250-pound man. We don't want to kill a law enforcement officer that's a dog. So the dogs are wearing Narcan on their collars. and you don't want the dog to go in. Remember, I said this yesterday, kind of in the Miami Vice days. Remember, you'd watch Miami Vice and you'd go in there and see if it's cocaine and rub it on your gums, right? They don't do that anymore because that'll kill you, right? That'll kill you. They don't go in, and if you see powder everywhere, you're wearing a face mask, right? Because the size of a grain of salt will kill a 250-pound man. You can't use latex gloves. You have to use nitrile gloves. This stuff is bad. It's really, really bad. You breathe it in dead.
And are you seeing that locally as well?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, next slide.
Right.
Fentanyl. Does fentanyl look like heroin? Can the buyer tell the difference? Can't tell the difference. Looks the same. Next slide. But that's not our only worries. The U-4770 drug made by Upjohn Pharmaceuticals in 1970 is a Schedule I narcotic. You can buy that on the internet from China for $5. Delivered to your home. Parents don't know you got it. Families don't know you got it. Just a box, Amazon, right? Next slide. Carfentanil. See the penny? That's all it takes to kill a 250-pound man.
Dot, a white dot.
The white dot. Looks like fentanyl, looks like heroin. We have that here in McLean County. We do. Sadly, the drug dealer actually used his own product and died.
And died. Okay.
Isn't that sad? He didn't even know that he was getting bad stuff.
Well, you can change your tone.
But he didn't even know he was getting bad. He didn't even know he was getting bad stuff from his drug cartel dealer. Next slide. So your average age is a 32-year-old white male. That's your average. Next slide. So in McLean County, we had 19 deaths. We put chronic narcotism. I think the synthetic fentanyl was here in McLean County in 2015. The person was known to have just bought the drug, had the needle still in their arm. Dad said, oh my God, there was a drug dealer here. NMS, which is the National Toxicology Test that we use in McLean County and pretty much the rest of the state of Illinois uses, did not have a test for the synthetic fentanyls. We didn't know that. When you go to a hospital and they do, we always, if someone dies, we get administration blood, so the admit blood. Well, the admin blood at the hospitals can't even, they're like, God, it looked like an opioid death. They were foaming and everything like that. It looked like an opioid death, but they tested negative. Well, these drugs are so sensitive that you have to use like a really high-tech lab, which is NMS, that we use. But in 2015, they didn't have tests for that. And I'll never forget that kid's name. It was out in a smaller town. It wasn't here in Bloomington Normal. It was a young kid out in one of the smaller towns. Next slide. But in 2016, I thought we were going down. Remember, that's the first time we started teaching about Narcan. Never going to happen in McLean County, right? We're the second wealthiest county in the state of Illinois. Chicago, St. Louis is the drug trade, though, right? Next slide. Look what happened in 2017. The sad part about that, though, is July 26th of 2017, McLean County only had 7 overdose deaths. Only 7. That's when synthetic fentanyl hit McLean County, the last half of the year, and that's when it went up. And the reason I put MDMA on there is because someone that's using MDMA, which is like ecstasy, they don't care. They're going to try anything. That's the child with identity versus isolation that will take anything. Next slide. In 2018, we were kind of going into the dip. Well, that's when we all realized the opioid crisis really came out. That's finally when Fox News and CNN and everybody started putting it out. What did we know in McLean County? We knew about the opioid epidemic in 2016, but it really wasn't nationally talked about. So it went down. And it went down because they were like, oh my gosh, the drug addict was like, we got to find a different drug. Well, then the meth went up. And you'd see that in who's getting arrested. The issue with the meth, though, it's not the meth that we knew of, that were blowing up trailer homes or something like that, where they were mixing Sudafed with anhydrous or something like that. The drug cartels got smart and said, well, we'll make even better meth. We'll make Breaking Bad meth. Because remember, Breaking Bad, the television show that everybody liked to watch, was really kind of Hollywood's glorification of something that may be happening and not really true. Well, the fact of the matter is that's when it started really happening. Because remember, every drug trade, $66 million. and we're legalizing marijuana whether you're for or against it. I'm not here to tell you what's better or what's not, because I don't know. I didn't do drugs. I don't know, right? The thing is, and we do need marijuana for people that have cancer and stuff, so I'm not well versed on it. But you legalize marijuana, you're gonna have a new drug, and that's why the heroin crisis came through too, right? There's always one behind. Like Adderall, you think your college kids, what are they addicted to? They're addicted to Adderall. Ask your college-age kid, ever done Adderall? I taught nursing for years. They're like, yeah, we were studying. Adderall's bad for you? I'm like, well, if you don't have ADD or ADHD and your brain doesn't need it, why are you taking it? Oh, it was my friend's prescription. You know that's drug dealing, right? That's illegal. But everybody's doing it. Remember, identity versus isolation. Okay, next slide. So in 2019, as you see, viral fentanyl. That's even a stronger synthetic fentanyl that's in our county. Acetylfentanyl, acrylfentanyl, all of those. Isn't that amazing? Next slide. So legislation, they did the Heroin Crisis Act, so that's one reason I get out and educate as well, and why everyone is educating. Educate of what the crisis is. Next slide. Prevention. Preventing people from taking and getting addicted to opioids. Start low and go slow. Reduce heroin addiction, right? Help these people when they're addicted to opioids and try to get them off of opioids, which we're doing that. Reversing the heroin overdose. Next slide. So as a prescriber, if you go to a prompt care now, they won't give you pain meds. Sorry, we don't have pain meds, but I need my pain med. We don't have pain meds. You have to go to the emergency room. Still hard to get.
Restate that. You read over that very fast. If you go to a doctor and the doctor will not, or who will not provide?
Prompt care.
Prompt care.
Okay.
Prompt cares won't give pain meds anymore.
Is that statewide, or is that something they initiated, or just locally?
Carl doesn't, some of the local ones don't do it.
So that is a choice that they have made because they
Yes.
don't want to create an addiction problem.
Because remember, prompt care is not your primary care physician. It's not someone who keeps seeing you every time. You may see this person only once. And the computer access hadn't changed yet with the Epic and Meditech.
Thank you.
Okay? Does that kind of make sense?
Much more.
So here at Broman is just changing to Epic now. Carl has Epic and St. Joe has Epic, but they have to read each other. And remember, they're not the same corporation. And so now with Broman going to Epic, which is great, so all the hospitals are going to Epic. When I work at Carl as a nurse practitioner, I can see if they've been to Broman or St. Joe and find out what their medical history is. Whereas before, that's the first time they've walked into a prompt care. I'll have no idea who they've seen or what.
And Epic is like a database.
Epic is a database, the computer system that everything talks to. But remember, it costs a lot of money to healthcare. Yeah, to talk. So it's been years of everybody trying to get together. I can't remember how much it's costing Advocate Aurora Health to go from Meditech to Epic, but remember, all those records have to be changed over. Yeah, it's amazing.
So if you go into a prompt care and have a pain, what do they recommend, Tylenol or something like that? How do they mitigate some of that pain?
Depends on what kind of pain you have.
Okay.
You know, so if you go in for abdominal pain, prompt cares don't have CTs, and so they can't really tell if it's, if you have abdominal pain. Do you, do the scale with, is it an appendix? There's tests that they can do, the iliopsoas sign, those type of things. The frog leg, if you will. They can tell that. Oh, we almost out. Okay. So, anyway, next slide. So, physicians can go in and, evaluate, explore their health risks, listen to them, talk to your patient. It's all about really taking care of that patient. Next slide. So, primary prevention. So, providers aren't writing as many prescriptions, but again, you can't get rid of all the pain medications. You can't. People have pain. Pain is real. Pain can also save your life, though. Remember, if you have an ankle fracture and a week later you're having more increased pain of that leg, and you're like, oh my gosh, this hurts really bad than it did. You could have a blood clot that's traveling to your lungs to cause a pulmonary embolism. Pain can save your life. Let's say you have overt back pain. You've never had back pain before, and you're like, oh my God, my back hurts so bad. And you haven't been doing yard work, but what happened? Well, you could have a slip disc, but you could also have, if you're a female, you could have ovarian cancer and didn't even know, right? Pain can tell you something else is wrong. Pain doesn't happen in a vessel, right? Something usually precipitates that. Some injury, something happens, abdominal pain, massive abdominal pain where you're vomiting or something like that. Could be a ruptured diverticulum, right? Could be a ruptured appendix. I mean, so increased pain could be something. A thunderclap headache that you've never had before could be a ruptured aneurysm. Pain can save your life. Next slide. So what can we do as medical providers? Again, I was talking to a Rotarian that did massage therapy. When I was a nurse practitioner teaching my little baby ducks, my little nursing students, right, we would go around the nursing unit and we'd rub everybody's back. You're laying in those plastic beds, rub everybody's back. When was the last time you were in the hospital you got back rubs? Right? Oh, back rubs are great on those hard beds. You know, fluffing the pillows, doing those things can really, really help as well. I know it seems so simple, but it really does help. Start low and go slow. If you need a pain med, start at a low dose and see how it works. Start low, go slow. Don't throw them all at them. Avoid opioids and benzodiazepines, which is like Xanax. Next slide. So physicians have a role in this to really know their patients. And then the prescription monitoring system will help with doctor shopping. The prescription monitoring system is a great thing. It's really, really great. The only thing is the DEA license you have to have. So nurses can't use it, nurse practitioners, PAs, or doctors. So your nurse is your assistant. They can't really help and log in. But it's, remember when you go to work and you're like, what is my password? Well, for the prescription monitoring system, it's 14 letters long. It's up, down, right? Exclamation point, underscore. I mean, it's really intense to get into. And it's only updated every 24 hours. So let's say you come into a prompt care and you're seeing a patient and they want Robitussin with codeine, because now you have to look in the prescription monitoring system to get Robitussin with codeine, which is a great drug for your cough if you have pneumonia or bronchial cough. It's a great medication. The problem is if you're seeing 30 to 40 patients a day in and out, who's got the time? Right? And then you look it up, but it's only updated every 24 hours. So you can have a patient go see their doctor in the morning and say, their pain medication doctor, I had a student like that who got Opana. And she passed her drug test, it was great. You know, long-acting drug. She had a lovely conversation with her healthcare provider. In the afternoon, she went to her primary care provider and said, my children are stressing me out. They gave her Xanax because remember it wasn't updated, which is a benzodiazepine, which potentiates the opioid and works on the breathing receptors. And then she went to prompt care and she's like, I'm going to take a long flight. I'm not going to sleep very well. It's going to be a time change. They said, I'll give you a couple Ambien. Great. Dead by morning. They were all looking in the prescription monitoring system, but it's not updated for 24 hours. Plus, when the prescription monitoring system first came up, pharmacists didn't have access to it. What's that mean? Well, there's always these levels of care. You have the nurse that you come in, you have the provider that sees you, writes the prescription, right? Looking in the chart. Then you go to your pharmacist, right? There's always supposed to be these stopgaps to save people's lives. But the stopgap of the one that giving you the actual drug, the pharmacist, it wasn't part of the prescription monitoring system. I mean, come on. So they changed that though. Okay, next one. So you don't want a doctor shop. Decrease the dose. Try to get them off. Decrease the dose. See what we can do. Substance abuse treatment program. Here in McLean County, we have a great program. I'm on the Drug Court Recovery Board. And part of that is after someone goes through drug court, because here what we're doing in McLean County is treating it as an addiction. It is an illness. It is an addiction. We're trying to save their lives. So instead of going to prison, they're going through treatments, kind of mandated treatments, because it's like Pavlov's dog, right? We got to train the mindset that they're loved, they're worthy, right? But you have to have consequences. These people, sometimes they've never had consequences before. So the board that I'm on is what happens after the addiction. It's recovery starts today, so it's a board that helps after they've made it through drug court. Because remember, Maslow's hierarchy need, food, water, shelter. They've messed their families, their jobs, their lives. Now they're not getting a felony. They're kind of treated through Chestnut and through everything else. But now we need to help them further along because their whole lifestyle has to change. Okay, next slide. And I told you about that. Next slide. So, harm reduction. right? We just need to save their lives. Here also we have the HEART program and safe passages. The HEART program is after someone's overdosed, law enforcement, and you know, they don't trust law enforcement, will go to their home and say, are you okay, what can we do for you? And then with safe passages, you can go to law enforcement and say, I'm addicted to the drugs, I need help. But remember, they're not in a trusting area because they've already done a felony, bought a legal drug, right? So we really have to show them encouragement and love and tell them it's okay to ask for help. Okay. We can just get through, and do you guys have any questions? Yeah.
One thing I think is responsibility for the public. If you're going to have a procedure done or whatever, to ask your provider, is there something I can get for less?
Sure,
And I did have a little problem, what you said earlier, because I am a dentist. And dental, there are certain people with dental pain, they require these things. But I give them 10 pills.
Right,
I
you
don't
give them a small
50.
dose.
I don't give them
Right.
50 or whatever. And even if I know they're gonna have problems for a long time, they have to come back and get it. I don't charge them an office call for it, but then,
But it all depends. You're like, you know, some do. So then
Exactly,
they
yeah,
do.
some
Yeah,
do.
so it's catch-22.
but the thing that, after the study came out, that said if you take, that you have to be rather healthy anyway. But if you get your wisdom teeth out, I tell them take 4 Tylenol, I'm sorry, 4 Advils, 2 Tylenol, and that would give you the same pain reduction as a Vicodin.
Yep.
And you don't, but you can't do that with people with liver problems or
Right,
kidney problems.
because the way that pharmacokinetics, the way that goes through.
But
Yes.
then again, at least you should know your patient before you even start.
We shouldn't
suggesting
prescribe it
something
like
that.
candy.
Exactly right.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Do all drug companies make opioids?
No,
No.
Purdue Pharma, who else?
I don't know.
Okay, but not all of them across the board.
There's so many drug companies, so many.
Tell you one thing, how many people in this room have taken oxycodone?
I think we all have one time or another.
Let's get-
No, no.
I guess-
Vicodin or?
Vicodin, I-